All right, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the Monday, September 12th, 2022 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We are delighted you all are able to join us this evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask that you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Leon?
Here.
Ms. Shantiska?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. So let's move on to adoption of the meeting agenda. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. We do have a number of special proclamations this evening. A lot of folks here in our crowd and our audience with us, so we're delighted to get to those now. Our first proclamation is regarding Welcoming Week, and Mr. Snyder will do the honors. So, Dave?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's a particular honor to recognize the grassroots work being done by our citizens on this critical issue. Whereas Falls Church's Vision 2040 envisions the city as a welcoming and inclusive community, and whereas immigrants and refugees are a vital part of our community, enriching our culture, bringing fresh perspectives and new ideas, starting businesses and fueling the economy, and contributing to the vibrant diversity that our city values. And whereas a welcoming culture can distinguish the city, uniting us at a time of division and enhancing relationships with our neighbors in and outside of the city. And whereas a welcoming environment also enhances the city's and the area's economic growth, global competitiveness, and overall prosperity for current and future generations. And whereas city residents have encouraged the City of Falls Church to engage with Welcoming America, a national movement. And whereas those residents have created Welcoming Falls Church, an organization dedicated to hospitality toward immigrants and refugees to create opportunity for all. And whereas Welcoming Falls Church has partnered with the Falls Church City Public Schools and the Literacy Council of Northern Virginia to launch an adult and family literacy center that teaches English to adults and children in the evenings at Oak Street Elementary School. And whereas Welcoming Falls Church has championed a Renting to Refugees initiative, an innovative public-private partnership that addresses the shortage of affordable housing in the city, which, with the support of the City Council, will welcome 5 refugees' families to the city. And whereas Welcoming Falls Church endeavors to engage all residents of the City of Falls Church through additional initiatives, all designed to encourage a more welcoming environment in the city. And whereas all of these considerations have become even more important in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby designate the week of September 9th through the 18th, 2022 as Welcoming Week in the City of Falls Church and proclaim the city's support for Welcoming America by exploring ways to engage and celebrate with Welcoming Falls Church. So thank you and congratulations. I know Mr. Bosen's in the audience, maybe some others as well. Could I invite you up to speak, please? Oh, yeah, all of you, please. Whoever. No, it's okay. Let's make sure your mic's on. I think we're having a little difficulty here.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdul Aslan. I'm part of this Welcoming Falls Church organization. I've been here in this area for the past 4 or 5 years. I worked before in a bank here in Falls Church. I serve as a branch manager, and now I'm working in a different financial service group. Just briefly, I would like to add comment for what we are doing here. We are working on something called Welcoming Network Professional, which is working with a special team and working with someone professional just to help all the refugees and any immigrants for their process and their recruiting, job mentorship, which is the most critical for any refugees or immigrants. And that's what happened with me a couple years before, just to having this job mentoring process, and that's what part of what I'm doing exactly to focusing on. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. And Mr. Bozen, did you have something you wanted to add as well?
Yeah, thank you, and I'll keep it quick because I know you have a big agenda. Let me start by echoing Abdo's thanks to you and the community for the response we're seeing, more and more activities and more engagement. I won't take time to go through the schedule of events for Welcoming Week. I think you've all hopefully been receiving emails about that, except to point out that the ice cream social planned for Sunday is now going to be Friday, 5 to 7. Because of the rainy day. We hope you all can come. Hope to see you all there. Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. at Mr. Brown's Park. Also, on Saturday, from 10 to 10:30, thank you very much to Dave and Letty for helping to arrange, and Scarlett for arranging the kickoff, the formal launch of our Welcoming Refugees Initiative. Representative Don Beyer will make opening remarks, and then we'll have a really special program. Lourdes Iglesias and Belena Lopiso will share stories about their experiences coming to the U.S. That's Lourdes from Cuba, Belena from Ethiopia, and it happened. It's a great story. They both ended up in the city of Falls Church in the early years of their time here, and that's really the why of what we're why we're doing this. That program will express hopefully the human quality of people like Lourdes and Belena. We would like to be neighbors. If we're building a community of neighbors, we want to build a community of neighbors with people like them. I'll do a very, very quick update about the Renting to Refugees initiative because your support was absolutely crucial, and thank you so much for getting that started. We've had 35 people sign up to be part of a support team for the first five families. So the support team structure is really important. Those people are getting trained. We've had 4 people who have been identified for support team number 1. One you all know, I'm sure, is Allison Brown, but others in the community as well. They plus one member of our steering committee will be they'll be assigned. They'll be the ones to help that family move in, and then others will also pitch in to help move into the apartment. Speaking of the move-in, we're going to have a community-wide donation drive that's going to kick off later this week. Support team number 1 wants to collect things, and we're looking for a garage, by the way, to store those things in. If anybody would like to offer that. I also like to share publicly for the first time, in addition to your support, the $50,000 that you all allocated, we've had a private donation of $25,000, completely unsolicited, wonderful, great news surprise from a couple in the city who want to be known only as John and Emily, neighbors in Falls Church, which I thought was a great expression of this. And that's significant because we're very much focusing on the first 5 families and getting the structures and systems, processes, all the training done. But that tells us that there's a lot of potential for this. And if we can do this well, and if the first 5 families can be settled well in the community and welcomed well, their resources may be available to continue this and make this something that's a really special part of the community in the coming years. If you'd like to hear more, I'm going to be at the Housing Commission meeting tomorrow, and then either Christine Buckles or Hannah Jordan will be at HSAC on Thursday to add and answer questions, because there's a lot of details that are quite important as we think broadly about the affordable housing agenda. This is a new program, a public-private initiative that will hopefully contribute along those lines. So that's it. I would love to stay and tell you more. Oh, just one thing. We have 32 volunteers for the Adult and Family Literacy Center that started up at Oak Street Elementary, including Dave's wife. So it's great. People are really getting mobilized, and it's another great program. Hannah Jordan deserves a big shout out for that. So that's it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your leadership and all you do for this community and your group as well. But why don't you come forward? We'll get a group photo, handing the proclamation over to you. And sir, you were getting up to speak. Was it on a different matter or this matter?
No, it was to translate something.
That's the next one. So hold that thought for just a minute. We'll get to you shortly.
Lynn and
So why don't you come forward if you'd like? You can receive this proclamation. Once you get squared up a little bit, we'll get, come on in, close ranks.
Yep.
Come on, that's all right. There we go. So good job.
right, so hold that pose. Nick in the back, you got yours? This is the newspaper shot. You to go? Yep. All right, thanks again, everyone. Look forward to seeing you on Friday and Saturday. So thanks for your great work.
Comment.
Even with heels. Doesn't help.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, just to reiterate how important this work is and how much we appreciate everyone involved. A couple of things recently have really underscored the fact that in many ways refugees are on the front lines of virtually every geopolitical and socioeconomic issue. Our church was one of the churches in downtown Washington hosting the immigrants that have been bussed up here from Arizona and Texas, starting well before the media had discovered what was really going on, as despicable as it is. And 2 weeks ago, Edie and I were in Poland working with the Ukraine refugees in connection with a medical team. And the experience affected us deeply and has made us realize the importance of the work done with refugees. So thanks to all of our citizens who started this effort, and I know you have our collective support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's move on. Next proclamation is Hispanic Heritage Month. And Ms. Leon, are you doing that one?
Absolutely, glad to do that. Whereas Hispanics have participated throughout the history of the United States in support and defense of the principles and ideals upon which this country was founded, and whereas Congress has chosen the time period ranging from September 15th to October 15th to celebrate the histories, cultures, and contributions of Hispanic Americans, and whereas Hispanic people constitute a diverse group with origins in 21 different Spanish-speaking countries in the world, whose heritage links them with North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean islands, Africa, Asia, and Europe. And whereas the Latin American and Hispanic population makes up approximately 9% of the City of Falls Church population and is expected to increase to 10.6% by 2025. And whereas Hispanic community members contribute to the great diversity and unity of the City of Falls Church with a rich history of different cultures, racial and ethnic backgrounds, and ancestry within Hispanic communities. And whereas, as a community and as a government, we are proud of the cultural enrichment brought by the diversity of the Hispanic population.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2022 as Hispanic Heritage Month in the City of Falls Church, and urge all to join and support the city's celebration of the rich heritage of our Hispanic residents. So I know we have someone in the audience who's going to translate that for all of us. So welcome to you, sir, and thank you for the work you're about to do.
Thank you for letting me speak. Okay. Considerando que a lo largo de la historia de los Estados Unidos, los hispanos han participado en apoyo y defensa de los principios ideales en lo que se fundamente este país. Y considerando que el Congreso ha elegido las fechas de 15 de septiembre a 15 de octubre para celebrar las historias, culturas y contribuciones de los hispanoamericanos. Y considerando que la gente hispana constituye un grupo diverso con orígenes en 21 diferentes países hispanohablantes del mundo cuyos antepasados la vinculan con Norte, Centro y Sudamérica, las islas del Caribe, África, Asia y Europa, y considerando que las poblaciones latinoamericana e hispana representan aproximadamente el 9% de la población, la ciudad de Falls Church, y se estima que aumentarán a 10.6% de la población en 2025, y considerando que los miembros hispanos de la comunidad contribuyen a la gran diversidad y unidad de la ciudad de Falls Church, con una rica historia de diferentes culturas, orígenes raciales y étnicos y linaje del seno de las comunidades hispanas, y considerando que como comunidad y como gobierno estamos orgullosos del enriquecimiento cultural que nos brinda la diversidad de la población hispana.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who's here to speak tonight who might want to say any words? If not, why don't you come forward and we're going to give you the proclamation. How about that?
And this is Josh Gomez, is correct? Yes. And are you a Meridian High School student? Okay.
And what grade are you in? 11th grade. Well, that was great. Come on forward in that too. We're going to go ahead and hand you these proclamations. There's one in English and one in Spanish. So, thank you so much. Yeah.
Nice job, Josh.
All right, turn around.
Do we have any pins, Madam Clerk?
Just open one.
Take your pick, whichever one you want.
Whichever language you prefer.
I'll do it in Spanish.
There you go.
There
That
we
seems
go.
appropriate.
All right, you're looking.
Excellent job. We've got a little pin for you, a little parting gift. But thank you so much. That was an excellent job. And congratulations to our entire Hispanic community. So thank you very much. Our next proclamation is regarding Disability Voting Rights Week, and Vice Mayor Hardy's going to do the honors.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas there are over 61 million people of all ages with disabilities living in communities throughout the United States, and whereas there are over 38 million Americans with disabilities are eligible voters, and whereas the disability community has a critical interest in policies and decisions made and enacted at local, state, and national levels that directly impact the lives of people with disabilities, and whereas making sure people with disabilities have access to voting is essential if these policies are to meet the real needs of people with disabilities in our communities, and whereas voting is one way for the disability community to have a say in the people and policies that impact communities, and whereas Rev Up, which stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power, is a national effort to build the power of the disability community.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the week of September 12th through the 16th, 2022, as Disability Voting Rights Week in the City of Falls Church, and urge all to support the growing involvement of the disability community in the political process. Madam Clerk, why don't you take that sign down, too, so we can see Jeff there. Jeff, I don't know if you want to say anything or not.
Sure, absolutely. Mayor Tarter, Vice Mayor Hardy, thank you so much. I applaud, the Falls Church City Council for taking, measures to, recognize the importance of disability voting rights. I've been working in politics for a better part of 8 years, and I really have tried to make my mission as to empower all people, especially people with disabilities, to, have the ability and making sure they have the access to voting. That's so important for informed democracy. There's so much more that we can do with, to empower people with disabilities. We need affordable housing and accessible housing, but there's so much, in all aspects, there's so much more that we can do. And I really appreciate and applaud the Falls Church City Council for taking such enormous leadership on recognizing this week, and more importantly, the work that they do every day to empower and help people with all disabilities is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your leadership, and it's an area that is critically important and that we need to do more, particularly with accessibility. Again, telephone poles out of the middle of sidewalks, it just needs to happen faster than has been happening. So we appreciate your leadership and for your coming out tonight. If you'd like, we can come forward and maybe get a photo with the proclamation. Would you like to do that as well?
Yeah.
All right, Madam Clerk, any oaths of office to administer?
No, sir.
Okay, let's move on to the receipt of public comment. I'm going to start with a summary of written comment.
Certainly. Let's see. Steve Delaney of 913 Ellison Street suggested that most residents do not wish to see tall buildings on every block of Broad Street, and also asked about wood construction at Founders Row. Sean Dakin of 124 Whittier Circle provided an article about the efficiency of traffic circles and thanked the Recreation and Parks Department for supporting pickleball. Chris Blankner wrote with concern about pedestrian safety when crossing Washington Boulevard near the State Theater because of malfunctioning traffic signals. Patrick Cronin of 415 Lincoln Avenue wrote with concern about increased valuation of his vehicle and his personal property bill, tax bill increase. Dave Rifkin of 126 Whittier Circle asked that the real estate tax rate be lowered in light of inflation and the federal cap on SALT deductions. Todd Friedlander of 801 Hillwood Avenue provided comments on a request to increase the height of the Founders Row Theater and suggested that the theater CO be held until all storefronts in the project are filled. Prabhat Shrestha asked that affordable home manufacturers be given a place to locate it in Virginia in order to make housing more affordable. Charlie Lord recommended that the undeveloped space in front of City Hall remain green space in conjunction with the Park Avenue Great Streets project. Matthew Trott, 300 Pine Street, asked that the needs of the disabled community be taken into account when proceeding with the Park Avenue Great Streets project. The Friends of Cherry Hill Park provided comments on the Park Avenue Great Streets project. The Urban Forestry Commission requested one-time funding of $100,000 for an ISA certified consultant to complete a thorough inventory of the city's trees. The Arts and Humanities Council also provided comments on Park Avenue Great Streets project, as well as the Fellows Park Master Plan. The Historical Commission provided comments on the Park Avenue Great Street projects and also requested the creation of a working group to help plan, develop, and coordinate the city's 75th anniversary activities for 2023 and 2024.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to the receipt of public comment. That's folks in the room. If you'd like to speak, you're certainly most welcome to. We'd ask that you fill out a speaker's slip, keep your comments to 3 minutes, and provide your name and address for the record. Or for folks who might be on the internet wanting to speak as well, same goes for you. So I'm going to go ahead and let the clerk call the speakers.
Sure, and we'll remind everybody that we do request that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or under, and you'll be able to see the timer up here if you're in the audience, in person. First, we have Andrew Myers of 402 West Rosemary Lane, and then we have a speaker following him who is joining us virtually. That's Paul Rothstein of 7024 Falls Reach Drive.
All right, welcome, sir.
Check, check. There we go. Now we got a winner. All right. Thank you all so much for having me. My name, Andrew Myers. I live at 402 West Rosemary Lane here in the City of Falls Church. I am a very tired father of a 3-year-old, and I'm here to support, to express my support for the Greenway Downs traffic calming initiative that's been going on over the course of the last about 2 years, maybe it started ago. I am part of the working group. I am not here on behalf of the working group, but I was very involved in going around to the rest of my, is this sucker?
I'll let you know.
You let me know. I was very involved in going around to the rest of my neighbors and canvassing the folks to see what they thought about the prospect of traffic calming measures, and I want to be here the reason I came up here is there's been a number of letters and a number of folks that have come out against traffic calming, and I'd like to say that I feel that is a distinct minority based on my experience on West Rosemary, going out and talking to the 26 folks that reside on West Rosemary, and seeing that the vast majority of the folks there were very much pro-traffic calming. Now, there were a handful that were definitely anti-traffic calming. We have tried to come together with a reasonable plan for what we want to do on our particular street, and we want to make sure that the council knows that the support of the community is behind this initiative. As everybody knows, times are definitely changing over the course of the last 30 years in our neighborhood of how many folks are coming through and the speed of those folks and how distracted they are. We have a literally dozens of kids, elementary school and younger, that are running around Rosemary and the folks coming down from Poplar down the street. And we want to make sure that we have a very safe environment for raising our children. We had, I know last month's council member, myself, and about a dozen others of my particular street issued a letter to you guys explaining our support of this initiative. And so I'm not alone in this. It's not just me up here. Everybody else is home putting kids together. My neighbor is putting my daughter home to bed right now because my wife was out of town. All right, and I want to make sure that you know that it is a vocal minority that is speaking out against these traffic initiatives. The majority of the folks that are, especially on my street, are pro-traffic initiatives, and we look forward to the council approving it and the construction moving forward. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have Paul Rothstein of 7024 Falls Reach Drive. I believe he is on the virtual meeting.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul Rothstein of 7024 Falls Reach Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Falls Church City Council. A copy of my comments can be found at tinyurl.com/Falls Church Issues. That's one word. I'm also posting these comments to the next door group, Falls Church Development on Haycock Road, which has over 200 members in the last 3 weeks, and to Falls Church Neighborhood Chat on Facebook, which has over 800 members. I sent the text of these comments to you earlier today. I have previously invited you to join the Nextdoor group to interact with your constituents and neighbors. You can directly join the group by going to tinyurl.com/Falls Church Democracy. That's one word, Falls Church Democracy. I have 2 points today. First, Falls Church has discussed altering the heights of the towers near Meridian Hill High School and near the village condominiums to benefit the school's solar panels. I applaud the use of alternative energy. However, your immediate neighbors in Fairfax County should not be subject to shadows to benefit your solar panels. There are ways that you can creatively solve this problem. You can simply make sure that the height throughout the soon-to-be former Virginia Tech site is lower, the heights of the buildings. Also, there is ample space to the Meridian High School site where you can relocate the panels. I encourage you to provide an example of community-minded creativity to your students and not simply try to degrade the quality of life of your neighbors to achieve your goals, laudable as they may be. Second, I reproduce an email sent by the Coalition for Smarter Growth. This email states that Falls Church is, quote unquote, reducing traffic with these developments. You will also see exchanges between Evan Goldman of the developer EYA regarding this issue and related issues, and community members Cheryl Sim, Nancy McFalls, Carol Dexter, and me at tinyurl.com/First Goldman Discussion. This chain includes a link to a video of a discussion in which the transportation consultant Gaurav Slade states that there will be additional traffic on Haycock, and West Falls Church Active Transportation Study Group member Cheryl Sim discussed why that increase will be significant. I urge you to read that exchange. I also urge you to see the interaction among Evan Goldman and Nancy McFalls and Cheryl Sim at tinyurl.com/second Goldman discussion. That too is one word. If you believe that these projects are going to reduce traffic, please explain. Otherwise, the community should assume that the statement by the Coalition for Smarter Growth is wrong. You can justify your projects however you want, but if people can't agree to obvious, basic facts, then there is no basis of policy. Thank you very much for your consideration.
All right. Thank you, sir, for coming out to speak with us tonight. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Yes, sir, that's all we have for now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to council requests. Are there any council requests? Mr. Duncan?
Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while since we've all been together. I have a few things that I'd like to learn about tonight, but I think I'll hold most of them. I just wanted to pull out that one mention about the 75th anniversary committee that I believe the Historical Commission is suggesting, and make sure that we don't lose track of that. There's lots on our agenda here in the next month or so, particularly, but I think it'd be good if we could get a committee, as they suggested, stood up and work getting started before we get too further into the fall. Thanks.
Phil, I nominate you for that committee. I think it'd be great. First off, I agree. I think it's a great idea, and you obviously have some enthusiasm for it. So maybe you and Mr. Shields can get together and move things farther along. I know there already is a little head of steam, but maybe we can make sure it doesn't lose momentum. All right. Other comments or questions, requests? Mr. Snyder.
Just one quick one. I request that the city staff prepare a letter of support for our elements of the long-range transportation plan. Those comments are due by September 18, and it's under the auspices of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. And I know some of our citizens have been alerted, but I would urge any of our citizens, if they can, to provide input to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Vice Mayor Hardy.
Thank you. Following up on the public comment we received about Greenway Downs, Mr. Shields, if you have an update tonight, that would be terrific. I know that's one that is probably our largest NTC project to date, and there's probably lots of community attention. If we don't do it tonight, maybe next week when we have work session, since that's a transportation-focused work session, we can talk about the status of that and when we'll start seeing construction. Second is whether we could also get an update on when T-zones might be back on our docket. I know it was in the Planning Commission's hands before the summer, if we have line of sight to when we might see that again. And then the third topic is around the car tax. And I know that we had budget and finance meeting at the end of this week, is that right? And so perhaps that would be a good time to talk about what the latest is on that, whether we're hearing any abnormally high amounts of citizen complaints about things, or what our actuals are going to end up looking like. Budget and finance probably was a good first stop to talk about that.
All right.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions, requests? Okay, let's move on to the report of the city manager, Mr. Shields.
Well, thank you, Mayor Tarter and members of council. I'll just respond very briefly to some of the questions that are posed, and then I've got 5 other things I'd like to provide a kind of a rapid-fire report on. First, with respect to the Greenway Downs Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program, Jeff Sykes is our project lead for that. And what our commitment to the neighborhood is to have a process of making decisions collectively following the NTC guidelines. And it does require resident buy-in for those improvements that we are intending to make there to help calm the traffic and the cut-through traffic that goes through those neighborhoods. And so the key thing is to have a process by which the people can navigate, decisions get made, and then actions are taken following those decisions. And I think that's what our intent is, and everyone's expectation should be going forward. On the 75th anniversary, that is on the City Council's work plan, so the City Council is looking ahead to that event next August, and so I'd be happy to work with Councilmember Duncan to stand up a committee to work on that. That would be much more pleasurable work with a good long lead time for a good event for that. And lastly, on T-zones, I will just note that planner Jack Trainer has been assigned to be our lead case officer for that zoning code amendment. He is working through a schedule right now and beginning the outreach to board and commissions on the T-zones ordinance. I will communicate with council on what the proposed schedule is for public consideration of that initiative. The other 5 things I want to report on, I'll start off with just a note on the Fall Festival, which is coming up this weekend, September 17th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., rain or shine, right here at the Community Center. All are welcome. It's our 46th annual running of the Fall Festival. And Scarlett Williams is our lead for that, and she's been doing a great job in getting that organized. A couple of notes. It is Welcoming Week, and our lead-off presentation, we have a great lineup of live music. We also have the Taste of Falls Church and all of the wonderful things associated with the Fall Festival. But leading off at 10 a.m., we will have a presentation with Welcoming Falls Church to talk about initiatives in the city to be a welcoming community. So we want to thank that organization for joining the event, and that part of the program will be at 10 a.m. Also, for the public's awareness, at 11 a.m., the City Council will have a booth to be available to the public to ask any questions about policy or vision of the city and engage with council on that. So that will be from 11 till 12, one of the booths right there at the Community Center for the Fall Festival. The second thing I want to note is I encourage everybody to check out the new library website. It is at www.mrspl.org. And I want to thank Jenny Carroll and the whole library team and working to get that stood up. The intent of this update to our webpage is to provide a better experience for all of our library patrons, make it easier to find what you're looking for and check out materials, whether it's electronic materials or be able to access the catalog and get information, everything you need from the library in an easy-to-access platform. We're very excited about this website, and there's a good campaign to get word out for it. And we're also looking forward to ultimately updating the city website, to provide similar benefits for the public in accessing city services across the board. The third thing I want to update the public on is that our health department with Fairfax, we are a member of the Fairfax County Health District. And COVID boosters are now available, and this is the updated Moderna Pfizer booster that targets the BA4 and the BA5 variants, as well as the original strains of COVID. If you go onto the city website, you can get more information about how you can access your booster. Fourth, there was a question about personal property taxes, and I'll just make a few notes on that. We did put out a press release last week just to try to get information out to the public on this, and this is something that the City Council anticipated last spring after getting information from the Commissioner of Revenue about expected increases in assessed value of used vehicles. That's a very unusual phenomenon that's related to COVID supply disruptions, both across the board. The majority of used vehicles out there did see an increase in assessed value using the national databases that we rely upon, NADA or J.D. Power, which have now merged. Those are the assessment vehicles that virtually all local governments in Virginia use to set values for vehicles. The City Council did lower the personal property tax rate from $5 of assessed per $100 of assessed value down to $4.30. So it's a very significant reduction in the rate that was intended to lessen the burden on taxpayers who are experiencing that increase in assessed value. In our briefings that we've been getting for local government officials, it is anticipated that this increase in valuation will probably begin to abate and return to more normal valuations, but it might take 18 months or 2 years for us to get down to that level. Or back to normal as supply chains normalize as well. So we'll be watching that very carefully, but I just wanted to note that and answer any questions that the public might have on that. Also, to direct people to the Commissioner of Revenue or to the City Treasurer if you do have any questions about the bill that you got or about the valuation of your vehicle. And then the last thing I will just note, we had a 9/11 service this past weekend to mark the 21st anniversary of the attacks on America that occurred on September 11th. This observance was held at National Cemetery just outside the city limits. I want to thank Harry Shovlin and the National Cemetery staff for hosting that event. It featured the Falls Church Concert Band, and Harry Shovlin with the Falls Church Veterans Council served as their MC. It did feature some testimony from our first responders, our fire and police from Fairfax County and the City of Falls Church. Our police chief, Mary Gavin, was the speaker, and she was a first responder at the Pentagon on that day in 2001, and she shared some of her reflections on that event and what it meant to serve in that capacity. We also had Senator Chap Peterson was there, and he spoke about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and I think that's an inspiring message for all of us to carry forward. That's all that I would have to report tonight. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Shields? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. Thanks for hitting several of the marks I had in my book. Let me just bring up three other things. One, over the course of the summer, several of us visited the Westmoreland Street situation, the auto lot, the Latingeria, just to kind of monitor things. Just want to make sure that we keep our eye on that, and whatever the city's intended activities are, whether it's signage or enforcement or whatever, are something that we keep at the top of our radar screen. My impression of the visits that I made was that things are settling down, and there was a noise issue with the fan that the last time I was by there seemed to have improved. Parking in the no parking area is apparently episodically still a problem, though, so enforcement would be helpful to have because it's a public safety issue if you can't turn into the street from Lee Highway where, as we know, traffic often goes quite fast. Anyway, just keep our eyes on that. Further up Tenor Hill, I think maybe a couple of years ago I brought this up, and vegetation grows back, but the things are looking kind of wild again. Wallace Street and South Maple, I think unless it's changed in the last day, but 2 days ago when I drove by there, the vegetation is in a condition in the right-of-way, I'm pretty sure, that I don't believe we would tolerate anywhere else in the city, so it'd be good if we could get some weed whacking work done in that area. And if there's plans for a sidewalk of any kind further down from Ed Henderson's house in Borwick G, I'd love to know about that because that would solve this recurring problem of wild vegetation in that location. Here's an easy one. Did we buy the house on Sherrow Avenue like we said we were going to do back in June? Did I miss that?
We are working with the homeowner just to finalize that contract of sale, but things are moving forward.
Okay, great. Okay, finally, and in conclusion, Gresham Place, sorry, can't find the words. Gresham Place. I brought it up during the summer a couple of times. There was a communication that I received today from a couple of the residents in the neighborhood who went over and had a chat with the fire department folks and kind of came away with a story that was not, at least in my mind, consistent with what we had heard before, which was that the change in the signal was somehow related to a request by the fire department. At any rate, the more I hear and try to learn about this issue, the less I understand what's really going on. So, again, let's keep our focus on that because it's a public safety issue. If that were a new development there with all those townhouses and that office building, there's no way that we would allow, an unsignaled intersection to persist at that location. And I think we should treat, existing residents and businesses the same way we do new applications for residents and businesses and address that problem. I'm not really sure that it's going to have to wait for as long as I thought that it would. If folks could just set their mind to restoring things to the way they used to be. I don't believe the fire department, at least as they represent themselves in this note that I received today, instigated the request for a change in the signal to the condition it's in now. So I just want to make sure we don't lose track of that. Thank you.
Mr. Shields, do you have any update on Gresham?
I do not. We took it all the way through top management with Arlington County. They seemed very firm on what they were doing, and I've relayed that to the council. So at any rate, I will follow up with their engineers just in any additional information they have, but it seems that line of inquiry has been exhausted.
I'll forward you the email.
Okay.
Because apparently the fire department has filed a request for a change through the Arlington process. I mean, I know Arlington's bigger than we are, but you wouldn't think they'd be that big that they.
It's certainly possible that the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing,
that's
but
what it
the
sounds
traffic folks seem to be very emphatic about their position on this.
When you say top management, do you mean the county manager or someone less than?
Deputy county executive, county manager, yeah.
Okay, so.
Mr. Mayor, could we ask perhaps the city staff to prepare a letter for your signature?
Sure.
And perhaps indicate that you have council support for raising this issue, and we need to get this dislodged from the bureaucracy.
Sure. I mean, I can also make a call. But why don't you put together a letter, at least I'll have talking points. Maybe I'll start with a phone call. Sure. All right, anything else, or should we move on to business on the agenda? Let's go on, Madam Clerk. Business on the agenda, please.
Yes, first of all, we have an advertised public hearing for TR 22-35, resolution to amend resolution 2018-37 to change the approved voluntary concessions, community benefits, terms and conditions, amended and dated February 22, 2021, resolution 2021-07, to reduce the minimum number of theater seats required and provide for the withholding of additional residential certificates of occupancy until the theater lease is executed for the project known as Founders Row on application by Mill Creek Residential Trust, Founders Row Holding, LLC.
Mr. Shields?
So, Council, we would, the staff request is for both the Founders Row items, and there's two of them. One is the resolution that the clerk just noted, and the second is the Economic Development Agreement with respect to the theater, that both of those be kept together, but both of them be deferred to your meeting of September 27th. There are two reasons for this. One, the Planning Commission has a mandatory recommendation, and that is going to occur between now and the 27th. It has not yet occurred now. So on the change to the voluntary concessions with respect to the theater condition, we need to have that Planning Commission action before the council can take action. And with respect to the Economic Development Agreement itself, the Mill Creek has made 4 requests that the city is not yet agreed to. There are discussions about those ongoing, but we'd like additional time to have those discussions, and we believe we'll be able to do so in time for a discussion and council consideration at your meeting on the 27th.
All right, questions, comments? Mr. Snyder?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, can you tell us what those 4 elements are? And obviously, not happy with this development, as well as some prior request demands that they've made to provide benefits for themselves at a cost to the city. But can you share that with us, or do you need a closed session for that, or what?
So these were shared with the City Council at first reading, just to let the council be aware that these issues were outstanding. I confess I don't have my notes from that in front of me at the moment, but they relate to the milestones that are required in that agreement for performance, and they're asking for additional months of time to meet those milestones. There's a provision right now that calls for the incentive payments by the Economic Development Authority to commence in the first full fiscal year after the opening of the theater. They have asked for a proration so that the benefit would actually start when the theater opens as opposed to waiting for the calendar to turn around and start on July 1st. Those are two of the items. A third relates to, it contemplates the city council potentially increasing the theater tax amount above 10%. And they're asking for a provision that if the city council were to do so, that the value that's generated by a tax rate above 10% of the ticket price be made a part of the incentive payment so that the value of that goes to the developer. Those are three, and I'm not recalling the fourth. Maybe there were just three. Those are those are the items.
Thank you, I think.
Vice Mayor Hardy?
Thank you. Is the developer on the call by chance, or is it just staff tonight?
It is just me tonight.
Okay. So I know this is going to be likely deferred, and then we'll come back in 2 weeks, but I did read the red line that has the developer provided kind of changes that you just enumerated. So I did have some thoughts. At the risk of being a broken record, I know that I've asked for kind of interim milestones. Now that milestones were pushed out 4 to 5 months due to all the various reasons I'm sure Mr. Muffler can give us, the two new milestones I saw they put in there, which is one, design development progress drawings by the end of the year, and then the second is giving us quarterly updates between now and whenever the theater opens 18 months from now. I would like staff's assessment before our September 27th meeting when this is coming back to see whether those two are sufficient or whether there are additional milestones we think would reasonably show good progress. Because ultimately, I like the concept of milestones, and I understand that due to various market conditions, the fact that we've been negotiating this agreement, that things have to move out. That said, I want to make sure there's still forward progress, so I would love staff's assessment if those two are enough or whether we should be asking for more, because I did see that in the red line. Second thing, which I think several of us have asked for, is I would love to see a copy of the lease, or have Carol see a copy of the lease. I think that should be a good way to show us that there's good faith in this and that there's a real theater coming on the other side, especially if we are agreeing to additional terms. And then two peripheral things that we've talked about that I want to get resolved before the 27th. One is the location of the bike share that I know we've batted around for a while. That's probably not related to Mill Creek, but perhaps we need them to think creatively with us and where we should locate that. That's outside of Northwest Street. And then the second that I've asked for several times now is improvements to the plaza. So I think it needs more shade and more movable planters. I've made that request several times to the developer. I would love to see those extra commitments before we consider the changes to the Economic Development Agreement on this 27th. Thank you, that's it.
Other comments, questions? Mr. Duncan?
I was just going to make a motion if there are no more comments or questions.
I have a few.
Let me know when.
All right. So I would just say, I mean, I guess it's very frustrating. We have continued to push this off, and it seems like a moving target. We were told that restaurants would be opening and they would be under construction. To my mind, there's little to no activity in the ground floor of this development a year after it opened for its residential uses. We've gone ahead and approved a second phase of this, again, without any performance on the things that are really important in this community, commercial development to the movie theater. So I really think we need to hold their feet to the fire. If they are asking for additional concessions, as you just described, I think they should be tied to milestones and that they, are effective only if you meet these milestones to really have some teeth behind what has appeared to be a continually moving target now for going on years. So it's very frustrating to me, and I think we really need to hold the line. So that would be my suggestion to you. Mr. Duncan, yep.
I had one more question before.
All right.
Debbie, did you? A question for Ms. McCoskey. So when I read the red line of the new Economic Development Agreement, I saw that the language changed from calling it meals tax to sales tax attributable to food. Is that just a nomenclature change, or is that something we should think through?
That would make a difference in the subject, because there is a meals tax that's a specific city meals tax, and then there's a state sales tax that might apply to.
So even though the amounts are the same as what we discussed in the business terms, is this something that we need to be concerned about?
I think it's something we need to be very careful about.
Okay, so I will add that to my list of
Okay.
4 things, Mr. Shields, if we can nail that down, because I did notice that change in terms, and that was a red flag for me. Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Duncan?
So administrative guidance here, do I go 2235 and then 2236 in that order?
So far, we have, so far, we should have only read out the title for 2235. So we should do that one, and then the clerk should read the title to the second one.
Okay, thank you.
And would you like a public hearing on that? It was advertised, and we
All right.
will re-advertise
Sure.
it.
Did you have guidance?
Do you want to go ahead and call for a public hearing in case anybody should want to speak, Mr. Mayor?
Sure. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I move to defer consideration of and continue the public hearing on TR 22-35 to September 27, 2022 City Council meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
Ms. Leon on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. And the next item is TR 22-36, resolution to adopt an economic development agreement between the City of Falls Church, Virginia, the City of Falls Church Economic Development Authority, and Founders Row Holdings, LLC.
All right. Any additional comment? Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Mayor, I move to defer consideration of TR 22-36 to September 27, 2022 City Council meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
Boy, that was a tie. Ms. Hiscott on the,
Sorry.
by a nose. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Next item?
Yes. We have TR 22-27, resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding, MOU, and restrictive covenants with Wesley Housing Development Corporation of Northern Virginia for the purchase and operation of properties in the Virginia Village subdivision for the purpose of affordable housing and future redevelopment, and authorize the city manager to execute the MOU and restrictive covenants on behalf of the city.
All right. Mr. Shields, who's handling that?
So Dana Lewis will be our staff lead for this item, but we also do have representatives of Wesley Housing on the call with us, and Dana will make the introductions of our colleagues with Wesley. Council, tonight what is on the agenda is a request to give final consideration to a resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding between the city, the Economic Development Authority, and Wesley Housing for the future operation, maintenance of the Virginia Village quadplexes, in addition to have Wesley Housing be our partner in using Amazon Reach funds to acquire additional quadplexes. And then 3, the MOU contemplates the potential of a future redevelopment of the property for the purpose of affordable housing in this area. And it lays out some of the guidelines by which the City Council would have approval authority for that, and lays out some of the principles of at a high level of how that redevelopment could occur. So this is a really important matter before the City Council, and a great deal of work and thought has gone into this between the City Council, the Economic Development Authority, and Wesley Housing. So the staff recommendation is to approve the MOU. Attached to it are draft covenants that would be recorded and run with the land for all the quadplexes that the city has already purchased with the EDA, and then would be a model covenant that would be applied to future properties that hopefully will be acquired in the future. Let me turn it over to Ms. Jones, who will provide a staff report on this item, and then we'll hear from Wesley Housing, and we look forward to any questions or comments. I will also note that we did have a call with the city. We've had a lot of work with the city attorney and Wesley's legal counsel, and we had one final walkthrough today, and the draft that is before the council on the dais and that was posted this afternoon reflects the changes from today's meetings. We'd like to go through those and make sure that the council is aware of those changes as well. Ms. Jones, let me turn it over to you for a staff presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Very happy for this day. It's been a long process. But we're here tonight. I do have a presentation, and we have made some updates to the MOU, and we're glad to bring it for you this evening. So we can go to the next page. So these are some of the updated major provisions of the MOU, and as Wyatt stated, it's been a team, and we've been working real hard on this even up till today. Both the city attorney and the Wesley attorney have approved and reviewed all the documents. So you can go to the next slide. So just as background, within 90 days of the effective date of the MOU, the city parcels are going to be conveyed by the EDA to Wesley by the special warranty deed. Hold on just a minute. And then after that, Wesley Housing will own and operate the parcels. We do have a restrictive covenant that everyone has reviewed. A draft is attached. And then on September 6th, I did make a presentation to the 8 EDA, and they did approve the updated MOU and restrictive covenants, and the chair is authorized to sign those documents after this evening. So with the MOU, what it states is that Wesley Housing will own and operate the quadruplexes for housing, and it'll be affordable to low to moderate income persons earning no more than 60% of AMI. And the existing residents that live there right now may have income up to 150% of AMI, because we have a variety of incomes in the property right now. Wesley Housing will provide tenant services to residents, as they do at all of their other properties. They'll retain the lease agreement with the nonprofit that we have in one of the buildings. They'll assume all the liabilities and risks associated with the operation, management, and ownership of all the properties, so the city will not have that risk any longer. Wesley Housing is going to secure a loan from Virginia Housing for the existing EDA-owned properties. We'll get the proceeds, and we'll be able to pay that back to the city. Loan proceeds will be used to repay the EDA, $925,000, and the city capital reserves will be $1.935 million, which were used to acquire 3 of the 5 quadruplexes, and I'll go over the history of all the acquisitions and the funding for the project in just a second. So Wesley Housing, after they acquired the quadruplex, after they take over ownership and operations of the properties, then they will acquire additional quadruplexes through the use of the Acquisition Strike Fund, which is the second part of the project. And that the purpose of that is to preserve and maintain the properties as affordable homes to low and moderate income persons. So at the time that the properties transfer, we will not displace anyone. But Wesley Housing, but we do need to look at what's needed for the financing that will occur. And Wesley Housing may provide reasonable incentives for relocation and lease termination to tenants in place at the purchase and the conveyance who earn more than the income levels required for Virginia Housing as a lender. So that would be anyone that earns over $150,000, which is unlikely. Currently, we do not believe there's anyone that is making more than that. And the federal sources of funding provided to the city, our goal is to ensure that the units are income eligible for low-income housing tax credits. In the event that a tenant does need to be displaced, the city does have a voluntary relocation guideline that was updated in 2015. That will be used. So Wesley will also earn a development fee of 5% of the purchase price plus all closing costs. Wesley will be the ones that apply for the Virginia housing financing for the newly acquired quadruplexes. And as I said, the goal is to repay the acquisition strike fund, and they'll create a revolving fund so that we can purchase more units. They will complete the rehabilitative work at 310 Maple Avenue that we have been having difficulty doing because we have not found anyone to do that work. So they will relieve the city of that responsibility, and they will take care of that. The city will provide ARPA funding for that. The city will allocate CDBG funding in the amount of $74,000. And this will be for capital rehabilitation related to the preservation. This will go to Wesley. We can do that up to 5 years and extend it if necessary. We came to you on July 25 for the first reading to provide real property tax exemption. And so we are hoping that that will go through. And then I wanted to kind of go over the project funding timeline because I know this is something that council had requested. So if you look at the timeline, it just talks about all 5 of the properties. So 208 Gibson. So we acquired 208 Gibson in April 2008. The cost was $650,000, and that was a general fund bond issuance. It's paid off in full. The city, there's no debt for that property. So the financing to retain the affordability is $480,000 from the city. 302 Shirley Street, we purchased that in March 2021. The cost of the acquisition was $925,000. That came from the EDA, Land Bank reserves, and the financing is that the Virginia Housing loan will provide the proceeds back to the EDA. 310, 312, that was August 2021, the acquisition date. The cost was $1,935,000. Those funds came from the general fund and capital reserves. And we will also use Virginia Housing Loan to repay the EDA for that. Repay the city for that. 310 South Maple, I don't know why we keep saying South Maple because it is Maple. That acquisition date was January 2021. That was $1 million. We used ARPA funds for that. The city contribution was $1 million. So if you look at the totals for all of that, it's 5 parcels. They're all 21-bedroom units. The cost of acquisition so far has been $4,510,000. And so if we want to retain the affordability, the city contribution towards this was $1.48 million. And so once Wesley applies for the loan proceeds are estimated to be $3,795,000. The rehab costs are estimated to be $200,000, and that's for 310 Maple, and those funds will come from ARPA. The grants that will be used towards the project are the $74,000 that I mentioned from CDBG and Home, and then community CHP, the nonprofit energy efficiency nonprofit, is going to also be using grants to pay for work to be done at 4 of the properties. And then, of course, we have the acquisition strike funds from Amazon, which is $3.75 million that will go towards the project, $700,000 from ARPA, and $100,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund. So going back to update you on where we are, both parties will redevelop the property where the affordable parcels are located. The redevelopment will include some amount of affordable housing. You know, that, all of that has not been determined yet. And we'll be also be looking at other uses that are determined through a public process. So we have a plan of public process where we will have community meetings. The commissions will be involved. It will be a full public process. The city and Wesley Housing will participate as part of that public process, as part of a working group. We're going to look at various issues to plan for the acquisition and redevelopment. Some of the things we'll be looking at is looking at the parts of Virginia Village that are the best likely to yield, we want to look at what are the parts that we can acquire with the acquisition strike fund. We want to look at the land use plan and zoning changes that might be needed, and what kind of sources and means we need to finance the development. We want to look at a phasing strategy, an overall master plan to redevelop. And those are things, as I mentioned, are not determined as of yet. It will be part of that process. So one of the major pieces of the updated MOU was our termination section. So the divorce clause, what if both parties decide that this is not working and there is a default? So we have two remedies for that. The attorneys worked very hard on this along with all the staff. So the first one, I'm going to read these because these are pretty detailed. The first one is the city may purchase some or all of the affordable parcels for the amount of the outstanding debt, including any related transfer cost and expenses, plus any project loans Wesley has provided that were previously approved by the city on those parcels, and other amounts as may be agreed upon by the city on those parcels, and an appreciation payment. And the appreciation payment will be equal to 50% of the appreciated value, if there is any, of the affordable parcels from the date of the purchase to the date of the sale to the city. And that will be net of all the then existing debts based on the assessed value. So that's option one. Option two is to permit Wesley Housing to keep the properties for an agreed upon reimbursement. And so these same remedies will be undertaken in the event that Wesley decides to walk away. They decide that they don't want to participate or operate the project. In either circumstance, the city gets to make the decision. And so just, we have a license agreement that we have prepared and that we're finalizing that will allow Wesley to go ahead and start the rehabilitation of the properties before the conveyance. And so looking at the timeline, so as I mentioned, last week, the EDA approved the MOU, the Restrictive Covenant, the license agreement, and ownership transfer, subject to the chair. We'll sign off on that after this evening. And then tonight, we come to you to request you to approve the MOU, Restrictive Covenants, and the license agreement. The license agreement is planned. It does not require council approval. And then in October and November, the Virginia Housing Loan Underwriting, Closing, and Transfer Ownership from EDA to Wesley Housing. And then we'll have a council public hearing and tax exemption second reading. And Wesley does need time to develop their LLC, and so that's why we're looking at October, November. So I do have Wesley Housing representatives here. Shelley Murphy, who is the president of Wesley Housing. I have Camilla McAfee, Judith Cabelli, and Tiffany Leung are all four here. So if you have any questions for Wesley, they're here. And then if you have any questions for Cindy or myself, Cindy, if you'd like to add anything to anything that I said, or Wyatt?
I think that's a great summary. I do want to reiterate the partnership and the good hard work to get us to this point, and also thank both attorneys for helping us work through the legal clauses that are before council this evening.
Mr. Mayor, can you check your mic, please?
Yeah, I couldn't hear
Sorry,
you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My apologies. Anyway, I just wanted to thank everyone who
thank you.
had been involved in this. It's clear a great deal of hard work and effort have gone into getting us where we are here today. And then I asked my colleagues on council whether they have any questions or comments. And that's where we are right now. So any questions or comments from council? Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Thank you to the folks in Wesley, Shelley, and Kamala. Thank you for all the hard work, and hopefully this is a milestone tonight and kind of setting the ball in motion for really a good long-term partnership. So thank you for all the work on this. I did have a few specific questions based on the blue line that was circulated at 6 o'clock tonight. I think one of the first things that jumped out at me was around the displacement concern. So up until now, we've talked about how displacement really was never on the table. And I think based on Dana's comments, it sounds like it's still not a concern, but I wanted to make sure we clarified that for the record. The language I saw was that we will never involuntarily displace anybody, but the concern is that if there are people making above 150% AMI, we will offer them incentives to because of the way Wesley gets its tax credit financing. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm going to let Wesley speak to that. They're more knowledgeable in that area. So would one of you like to address that question?
Sure. Yes, Vice Chair Hardy. Yes, you accurately referenced it there. The Virginia Housing Program is set aside for folks earning below 150% of the area median income. We don't believe, based on the current residents that are at the property, that there's any households that exist today that would exceed that. But if there were additional properties acquired and there were residents in there above that 150% of AMI, it would preclude us from being able to refinance with Virginia Housing Financing, which is the intent. So we would work with the city in order to either incentivize or find some alternative financing if necessary to be in compliance with that provision.
Got it. So while we're talking about the financing part, so I know what I've been calling the prenup terms. So in the case of divorce, which nobody hopes to do, one of the questions that came up before is, can the loans just be assumed by the city instead of those two remedies? It sounds like that is not an option.
I think we still have assumption language there.
Yeah, I think in the agreement, there's specific language that does allow for the city to take the properties and assume the obligations under the loans.
So it's not just those two then, because I think the two remedies were outlined were one, we buy it, or we...
Correct, and I think the one that says, it says we buy it, but the language in the agreement itself allows for the city to either, well, the city can take the property and assume the loan, and we would only have to pay off the loan at the time they ultimately became due. But the city can also designate another entity, such as another nonprofit, to take the properties if it wants.
Okay.
The PowerPoint was a summary of the terms starting on line 588 for termination.
Okay, and thank you for the chart that's on line 119. I think I'd asked for that previously, so that was really helpful to kind of remember the history of the 5 different parcels. Two clarifying questions. One is for the money that we're leaving in. So it looks like we're leaving in $480,000 from 208 Gibson, and then we're leaving $1 million in at 310 South Maple. The South Maple one, I guess, is just $1 million of ARPA that we're leaving in to the project. Is the 208 Gibson one just equity that's built up over time?
Correct. That's equity or the city's contribution from the original purchase, and that leaves some city contribution in the project and makes the loan refinancing cash flow work.
Okay. And then my last question is on the restrictive covenant. So thank you for providing the copy of that. I saw that the term for the affordability covenant is 30 years. Is that standard as well?
I'll let Wesley address that as well, because that also is a Virginia Housing. We talked about that today. Did you guys want to address why we went with 30,000? 30 years instead of in perpetuity or
Sure,
life of property?
that is a typical low-income housing tax credit timeframe for affordability, and it exceeds the federal requirements for CDBG of 20 years.
And so at 30 years, it expires, and we essentially have to go get more funding or have to re-subsidize the project. What happens?
Well, recall that this is predominantly for the initial financing, which is intended to really only have a life of about 10 years. This will get replaced and extended when we execute on the LIHTC transaction ultimately.
And what is a typical covenant length for that?
So again, it'll be an
It'll be 30
additional
years
30
again
years
then.
at that point, right? So, if it gets executed 7-10 years from now, the effective period would be a 40-year period, or 35 or longer.
Got it.
And if I could just add on to that, you can't do in perpetuity. That causes legal problems, but there are some jurisdictions who do longer than 30 or 40 years. For us, we intend to preserve it for as long as you'll let us, so that's not an issue. So we can talk about that when as we're going through the LIHTC financing.
Got it. I think we've just gotten accustomed to having our terms be in perpetuity, so we don't leave an issue for someone else to inherit in 30 years. So, but hopefully we can do this first phase well within that 30 years, and we can talk about that again in the long term. Terrific. Thank you for answering my questions. And again, appreciate the folks Wesley's partnership and look forward to a good working relationship going forward. Thank you.
Other questions, Ms. Leon?
Yes. Thank you again. I think what I would like or what I would appreciate is a little bit of insight into the thinking behind the wording here that says that the acquisition fund will allow a proposed redevelopment plan to be considered by the city 1 year prior to the loan maturity date. Can you help me understand
What line
the
is that?
thinking is for deriving the 1 year as the trigger to that redevelopment plan? I'm looking at line 614. I picked this up from the table. I don't know if this lines with the new version.
Yep, I think I have on the screen the section A, starting at 611. Is that where you're looking?
Yeah.
At? Yeah, and part of that is to set the termination terms tied to when the loans are, but we're going to be doing a lot of work in between, so we want to sort of have an end cap date, and that's where we picked 1 year prior to the refinancing or the loan terms, which are 7 years right now, as a trigger for the default. And Carol, if there's any legal language that you would like to add to the explanation upon that.
My concern is that it's prescriptive. And I think I'm interested in making sure that we preserve the flexibility around the ability to, incorporate public comment that we intend to invoke with the process that you referred to, Dana, and making sure that that information isn't stale, right? Like when you collect that public input, we don't want to sit for 2 to 3 years to plug it into something. So my concern there is just the thinking of keeping that flexibility, because my first impression, and I could be wrong, is that it seems prescriptive.
Well, I think, and being out last week, I haven't studied this as much, but
Okay.
I think what this is saying is that if the city, this is all a preface, if the city determines that Wesley Housing hasn't diligently pursued acquiring additional parcels with available resources in the acquisition fund to allow a proposed redevelopment plan to be considered by the city 1 year prior to the loan maturity date. I think what this is saying is that if we determine that they're not doing enough work, that the city will not get a redevelopment plan at least a year before the loans are going to run out on these properties. Then, and if you go down, then the city can declare an event of default. So what that year is saying is Wesley has to have diligently pursued its work in order to give the city at least a year to consider a redevelopment plan before the loans come to maturity, so that they can't essentially say at the last minute, oh, here, we don't want to move forward, it's not going to happen, and city, you only have 2 months to come up with the dollars to pay off these loans or refinance.
And then the flexibility is intended in the last sentence of that paragraph, line 623, where sole discretion, the city can extend or not, because there could be extenuating circumstances. So this is to make sure we're working together and have a plan in place in the rare event that we need to face a
Okay, so
divorce.
the intent of this, as we talk through it, right, for the public intent in just simple English, right, is we intend, as part of this redevelopment plan, to, Section 3, 434, to actually discuss it, engage the public, and actually have a plan in advance prior to the loan maturity, even though we're not really specifying very specifically what that timeline is in this MOU. But that's the intent, is to not wait last minute until loan maturity date, right? We're going to run the development conversation in parallel with the other sections 1 and 2 of the intent of this MOU. I can't hear you.
Acquisition Phase 2 and the Phase 3 for the redevelopment, we have specific, plans, and certainly with the working group within 6 months of this MOU, we're going to be working the redevelopment piece. So this is only under termination if we have the unexpected outcome of not diligently pursuing it by Wesley.
So if you go back to page 10, it begins, Section 3 of the agreement begins at line 434. And that entire section is about how the city will put together a working group which will discuss and make plans and help guide the acquisitions by looking at the land use plan. It's a few pages of language, but the intent there is that the parties will be working together almost as soon as this agreement is signed to plan for the future acquisition. In that way, Wesley can target its acquisition efforts using the strike fund to acquire properties that will be most useful to a redevelopment project. And what the language that we were just looking at is about is if Wesley has not diligently pursued the acquisitions that might be available to them, the city can ultimately declare an event of default. But it also, it tells us that Wesley has to pursue that in enough in advance of the loans running out that the city will have time to do something. So that's probably clear as mud, sorry.
Sorry, that helped. Thanks. Those are,
Is that it?
That's it for now.
Okay. Other questions or comments, Mr. Duncan?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all I want to say is first, thanks to all who've been involved in this very complicated process, folks on the Wesley end, folks on our end. Now I understand about a year ago, or maybe more now, when we began to look to purchase these quads, there were some staff warnings that this was going to be a complicated business. It is a complicated business. And I appreciate the speed, really, with which we've made incredible progress to get us in the position where we are tonight. It is a bit of a scary predicament to be in, to give up control of property that we own here in the city, because as we know, any property is extremely valuable here. And so naturally, I think there's some anxiety about that, but at least as I read the documents, we seem to have protected ourselves as reasonably as we can. And most importantly, for my dime at least, having a passion, it's a passion we all share here on the council, for a complete community where we have housing options for people at a variety of income levels, including those who teach and provide public safety and retail services to us all. I mean, Falls Church is a great city to the degree that we're able to provide housing options for a broad spectrum of folks who live and work here. So for my money, the staff line at the staff comment at line 25, since the homes of Virginia Village are 80 years old, the long-term goal is to redevelop the subdivision to create permanently affordable low and moderate income housing. You know, we don't have to decide that we're going to do that or how we're going to do that tonight here in this meeting. That's a subject for public discussion. The EDA had an interesting discussion about dedicated affordable housing as opposed to housing development that would have some market and some affordable housing last week, and eventually they came down, you know, with unanimous support for this document that we're looking at here tonight. But at least for my perspective, pushing as hard as we can to really emphasize the need to provide low and moderate income housing with the Virginia Village properties is what I hope this and future councils will pursue, because, you know, I read the news about Wesley and all the great projects they do in our area, and I would love to have one of those projects that's essentially dedicated to low and moderate income housing to really help us drive up the numbers, because we are, you know, doing the best we can in the new developments to provide affordable housing percentage units, but we really need to hit a home run at Virginia Village, and I think we have it within our power to do so and to do it the right way and a good way with our own aspirations and with Wesley's expertise. I'm hopeful that we will be able to accomplish that goal. Thanks.
All right. Any further comment? Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve TR 22-27.
Second.
Mr. Snyder on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you, council.
to everyone.
All right. Next item.
Yes, we have TR 22-37, resolution to end the declaration of emergency and disaster due to the novel coronavirus COVID-19.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter and members of council. In March of 2020, the City Council ratified a declaration of emergency that was first declared when the public health authorities were laying out the public health strictures at that time, and we needed a public health declaration in order to have the flexibility in our operations to deal with this global pandemic. One of this declaration has allowed the city to do many things to help us get through this emergency. It has given us the ability to apply for and receive federal relief funds. It has allowed us to enact flexibility on the payment of taxes by our residents and businesses. It's given us flexibility to help our businesses recover from the economic fallout from the COVID pandemic and the shutdown mandates that came from the federal and from the state government. In short, it has given us many of the tools we've needed to navigate this crisis as best as we could in a very difficult time. At this point in the process, in the emergency, we are largely returning back to normal in terms of city operations and in terms of business operations in the city. One of the aspects of the declaration of emergency that still does have an impact on operations is with respect to public meetings. Under the emergency declaration, we have granted ourselves by ordinance flexibility from the Virginia open meeting laws, which allows our boards and commissions and our city council to have entirely virtual meetings. If the emergency is lifted, some of those flexibilities will go away that we've taken advantage of, I think, to very good effect over the past almost 2 years now. With the lifting, then one thing that in terms of operations of the city council and boards and commissions is that we would then come into full compliance with open meeting laws, and in that case we would need to have a quorum in the room for any public meeting, whether that's a board and commission or whether that's the city council itself. Under the open meeting laws that have been modified by the Virginia General Assembly, however, there is more flexibility for members of a public body to participate remotely. In addition, it is the city's intention to maintain the public access that we have for our meetings so that the public can continue to participate by remote device as we did tonight. So that at this point in the pandemic, that is kind of one operational issue that the City Council has discussed and is aware of, but we want to make sure that the public is aware of that implication as well. I will also note that with this action, if the Council does agree to lift the declaration, what is drafted before you really comes out of the discussion that occurred at the Council meeting in August, of having the Council consider this resolution tonight, but have the effective lifting of the state of emergency be October 1st. In addition to that, we have an accompanying ordinance that would provide an additional 6 months after October 1st to allow the city to work with the business community to make permanent or to modify zoning changes that have allowed our businesses to operate with greater flexibility with respect to parking regulations, outdoor dining, and that type of thing, to give us an additional 6 months to work through permanent changes in that area in a smooth and planful way with the business community. I will stop there and be happy to answer any questions that the Council has.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Shields. Questions, comments from anyone? Ms. Connolly?
Thank you, Mayor Charter. Regarding meetings and how they'll be different, will staff members who are presenting at meetings still be able to present virtually? So,
Yes.
yes. Okay.
So the open meeting laws really relate to the members of
Right.
the governing body or of that public body, and so that's where the rules take into effect. And I'm kind of in the clerk's territory here, so let me allow the clerk to answer more fully if I've gotten anything or mischaracterized anything. But
That was a perfect answer.
okay, well, that's rare.
Thank you for that perfect answer. My second question relates to working with businesses on zoning regulations. We first talked about this about 6 months ago, maybe, and at the time there were a lot of questions about how we would continue to support the business community. Has there been anything done in that interim to check on businesses, collect data on how businesses are doing with these changes or parking changes? If there's a need for more parking places or a business is saying they have plenty the way it is, I'm just wondering what data we have going into the beginning of these new kind of zoning regulations.
We have collected additional data since the last time the City Council discussed this, and we can share that data with the Council. We've also been making inspections, and the main thing that I think the city staff look out for is Americans with Disabilities Act issues that are, with the way that businesses have set up outdoors, those types of things. That's really been kind of the focus of any kind of discussions we've had with the business over the past year. But there are other things about occupancy, about access to public facility or, bathrooms and things like that. And those are things that we'll need to get into a little bit more detail over the next 6 months and see if we can't land in a good place. We have not made much progress in sort of addressing those harder issues with the business community.
And I believe we'd also talked 6 months ago about making it kind of one-stop shopping for businesses. So if they do wish to continue, they wouldn't have to go to 5 different offices to make that happen.
That is certainly would be our intent. One of the things we talked about last time was having a use permit to allow the flexibility that people have right now. That was not received very well by the business community, and so we've been rethinking that. And so I think that's a discussion probably for a later date with our subject matter experts on that. But I think the basic idea would be to make that process as easy as possible for the business community to navigate what the new codes would be.
That's it? Okay. Other comments? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. I lament the loss of the maximum flexibility that we've enjoyed in meetings, as you referred. I feel like over the last couple of years we've been exceedingly productive and exceedingly accessible to the public in our new remote meetings regime. But I understand time passes and attitudes about COVID change, and to some degree realities change, I suppose. I'm encouraged to hear that we'll allow staff to continue to dial in because, for somebody who's worked a full day and then has to stick around and listen to us drone on till 10 o'clock at night before their staff turn comes up is somewhat more tolerable if they can do it from home. So I think that's good, and we should encourage that. I was heartened to hear of the manager's report earlier tonight, the encouragement about getting boosters. I also lament the sort of loss of public spirit and unity that we enjoyed in the darkest hours of the fear of COVID, where we were really trying to push our vaccination numbers up high and, comparing ourselves to the county, and we're doing better. And there's something in that I would hope that we could retain as we move on to getting back to normal, because we're not really in normal places yet if you look at the data. And I know that everybody's health situation is different. Some people have had, one shot, some have had 2, some have had 3 or 4, and it's not as easy as it was the first time through, where everybody just needed to get their first shot. But I do hope that we'll find some way to work with public health folks in Fairfax to continue to get the message out that it sounds like, an annual flu-like booster shot targeted at the COVID strain or COVID variant of the day is going to be the way that we, live our lives going forward. And I would hope that Falls Church could be a leader in whatever it is the public health community decides is the best and most responsible, personal approach to trying to fight the disease. So I'll support this, but I did want to just say, maybe it's because I'm surrounded by 3 90-year-olds and have health issues myself, that we're not out of COVID, and whatever we can do to try to prevent illness among those who are most vulnerable would be a good thing for the Falls Church community to put its shoulder to the wheel to try to accomplish. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Hiscott?
Thank you. I do think that we've learned quite a bit from the participation rates and the involvement we've gotten with engaged citizens during COVID, and having the ability to have more access via electronics, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, et cetera. And I think that highlights what our legislative package put forward previously in support of lobbying at the state level to have it be legal for us to be able to do more of that, which in turn will allow those who may have reasons to be on a board or commission or council calling in from home, whether it's a physical disability or requirements for caring for children or aging parents, or all the reasons we enumerated in legislation proposed, which didn't pass. But I think now with the experience we've had, that there may be more who realize the benefits of how this aids in democracy moving forward. So I hope that our legislative package continues to promote the option in future years. We may not be able to make any changes in the next few, but I do think it's important to keep this on the legislative agenda as something that has been demonstrated to be beneficial to participation in democracy in Falls Church and across the Commonwealth. So I'm in support of this and in support of continuing to seek ways in which we can further participation electronically in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hardy, Vice Mayor Hardy.
Thank you. I second Debbie's sentiment on that. I had a question for the clerk. So since our August meeting, are we feeling ready to transition back to in-person meetings for October? What's kind of the latest update from our boards and our staff liaisons?
I feel like we're making very good progress. We're back to our old conundrum of how do we find rooms for everybody? So that's something we're dealing with that we dealt with before COVID. But I think a lot of folks are ready to come back. They're also taking advantage of folks that have health concerns, have 100% participation remote participation as long as there's a quorum in the room. So that's helpful for some people on the boards. We do have our new public meetings assistant, Sophie Kocher, and she is working with IT and working with cable, Falls Church Cable TV, OCOM, all the boards and commissions to make sure this is going to be a smooth transition. We're trying to get the room set up so that we can have good participation from the public, that they can hear what's going on and we can hear them. And for those who are electronically participating on the boards also, that's going on. So we also are committed to keeping videos going so folks can look at the meetings later and we have a good record of what the city has been doing. So we feel pretty confident, I think, that October 1 will work. I don't know, Carol, if you wanted to talk a little bit about the continuity of government. I know there's a little bit of wiggle room there in that ordinance.
Yeah, the ordinance that was originally adopted that left flexibility for meetings does last, and it's not really specific, but it does last for 6 months beyond what would be October 1st. So that will provide us, if needed, some possible flexibility that we can look to accommodate specific meetings.
And I think for me it reads that we can continue those meetings if it's unhealthy, unwise to be in a room together, right? There's a little bit of that language in it too. So I think if we're encouraging folks to go back October 1st, I think we're saying that it's safe to do that. So.
Great. Thank you for all the work that's gone into making the past 2.5 years work and transitioning out of it. Just like it took us some time to get into this, it'll probably take us some time to adjust to the new normal, which I hate using that term. And I know officially this is the next item. Sorry.
Sorry. I just wanted to thank you all for the resources you've given us and the support you've given us. Just having a person to focus exclusively on helping the boards and commissions has been very, very helpful, and we appreciate everything you did to make that happen.
Great. Thank you, and welcome, Sophie. I know officially this is item the one to extend zoning flexibility, but while we started talking about it, I guess one general sentiment that I want to make sure that you've heard loud and clear from us why it is, while we want to make it not overcomplicate it for existing businesses, I want to make sure that for any new businesses who want to take advantage of that zoning flexibility, the pathway for them is also easy, right? Because I think that's been the silver lining from all of this is we've learned that these unproductive parking spaces can be transformed into outdoor dining and lively entertainment venues. And that's way better for the restaurant, way better for the city. And so it's not just the existing businesses who've taken advantage of it, but I want to make sure that if there's new businesses who want to take advantage of that process, that it's pretty easy for them to start that too. Thank you.
Okay, other comments? I would just note, COVID's not over. We probably have as many cases probably as we've ever had, just people aren't dying as much from it, and it's not being reported. People are taking home tests, but people are still dying of COVID, and we're not out of the woods. This virus can mutate as it's done several times before, so I would just urge everyone to continue to take precautions, follow health guidance, and get yourself boosted. So with that, unless there's any other comments, let's go ahead and move to a motion. Mr. Snyder?
I'd like to move TO 22-15. Do you want to get any public input before we do that?
We can. Is there any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public.
I move approval of TR 22-37, resolution to end the declaration of emergency and disaster due to the novel coronavirus COVID-19.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
And council, the direction is to move the boards back as close to October 1st as possible. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next item.
Yes, we have TO 22-15, ordinance to amend ordinance 2008 to continue the suspension of certain zoning regulations for 6 months after the end of the COVID-19 emergency declaration by City Council.
Anything to add, Mr. Shields?
No, sir.
All right, anything else from council? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to grant first reading for TO 22-15 and schedule a second reading and public hearing for September 27th and authorize advertisement of the same according to law.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Conley on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, council.
Thank you. Let's move on to other business. Mr. Shields?
So the request under other business is an amendment to the FY 22 and 23 Community Services Performance Contract between the Fairfax Falls Church Community Services Board and the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Behavior, Health, and Development Services. And Ms. Jones is here to answer any questions on this. I will note that this amendment to the agreement is technical in nature, and it really relates to Fairfax County's reporting requirements to the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'll keep the report very short, therefore, and be happy to answer any questions. The recommendation is approval of the motion.
All right. Does anyone want to get into this? Okay. Do we have Ms. Conley?
I'll just move to approve.
Okay. That
An
sounds like a
amendment
plan.
to the fiscal year FY22 and FY23 Community Services Performance Contract between Fairfax Falls Church Community Services Board and the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right. Is there other business that has not been discussed that people would like to bring up? Any standing regional committee reports? Council member comments?
I did want to bring up, which I mentioned at the mayor's meeting, is the Coalition for Smarter Growth walking tour is coming at the end of the month, I want to say.
It's 5:30, I think, on the 20th. Recollection serves.
They asked that you register, so it was in that email that I forwarded to council and staff. They're doing a tour all the way from, I think, West Falls down Broad to WNOD.
All right. Other comments? Mr. Duncan, the minutes?
Just a scheduled question. I think I know the answer, but so next Monday we're picnicking with the volunteers and then going home for the meeting. Is that right? The meeting is, the
Yes.
work session's remote. The
Yep.
meeting, obviously, picnic's in person, okay. And then the meeting of the week of the 26th is on the 27th, Tuesday. because
Yes.
of Rosh Hashanah, and then the next meeting is canceled because of EML. Is that right? Canceled or
Yes.
moved?
Yes,
Canceled.
canceled.
Yep,
October the whatever it is.
it's the 4th.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to clear that up.
Do you want to go to the minutes?
Sure. The minutes for Monday, May 23rd, I spoke to the clerk. The only question I had about that is, sorry, hold on, I'm out of order. Okay, line 68. Do we spell Sean's name with a U or a W? I think it's rendered both ways anyway. Sean Dakin is either a W or a U. I think it's U.
I think it's a U.
I think that's correct. I think somewhere else it pops up differently. And this also relates to the next night's meetings. The address, be helpful if we could always put the address of folks in who speak, just so we know from where they come. Line 222, changes were being considered, past tense. Somewhat more substantively, at the top of the next page, line 260, there's an open quote limited to lots 1 acre in size, deleting the words. There's no closed quote there. I think the closed quote is supposed to go after size, comma. But just to be sure of that, check your records,
Okay.
Madam Clerk. And I think that's it. So that's what I've got for Monday, May 23rd. We can do these together if you want. Monday, June 13th, I had nothing except everybody from line 37 to 67 who wrote comments would like to have their addresses inserted after their names. So with those thoughts, I move approval of the minutes of Monday, June 13th and Monday, May 23rd as revised.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Any final parting words before we adjourn? Anything last? All right. Thank you all. Have a good night. We are adjourned.